Welcome to the Phillip Jordan Sports Podcast, a compelling discussion of local, regional, and national sports stories with intriguing guests. Now, here is your host, the self-proclaimed Wiregrass sports guy, Phillip Jordan.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Phillip Jordan Sports Podcast. Of course, I am your host, Phillip Jordan from Last Word on College Football and 96.9 The Legend in Dothan, Alabama, where I am the in-studio host and producer for Dothan Wolves Football and also host of the Wiregrass High School Football Report podcast. And welcome into the show. I'm happy you are making it a part of your day. I really appreciate everybody subscribing, downloading the podcast, listening or watching on YouTube, which you really only listen to it on YouTube, because there's no video interview for this episode like there has been lately on all the other ones. They'll be back next week, so don't worry. I'm not going away from video, just not on this episode. There's reasons for it, but I don't want to bore you with the boring details. But if you're on YouTube checking this out, please subscribe to the page, Phillip Jordan Sports. Like the video, this one and all the other ones. Please do so. It really helps me out big time. And if you leave a comment, I will read it on a future edition of the show. Of course, if you're only into the audio-only edition, checking out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, all your favorite podcast platforms. Appreciate that. And if you are on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe, rate, and review. Leave a review, just like the YouTube comments. I will read it on a future edition of the show. Now, here's what is on tap for today's episode. Just a few moments, very, very short moments. I'm going to be joined by Danny Vietti. He is a Major League Baseball writer for CBS Sports. Major League Baseball is looking to have their opening day next week, actually a week from the day of this podcast uploading. On the 23rd, Major League Baseball plans to have its opening day. 2 games that day. Yankees Nationals will be one of them. And then on Friday, the 24th, everybody else will start playing. So very exciting news. I feel like Monday's show was kind of on the somber tone a little bit with everything that was going on in college football, if there will be a season, all that stuff, what we talked about there. So kind of we're just being more optimistic here, looking forward to baseball season coming up. We're talking the game. It really feels good to be talking about sporting events coming up. You're not 100% sure because anything can happen in the next week, but you're kind of confident that we'll get some kind of sports. I know NASCAR's been going on, Major League Soccer. We've had sports in other countries, had the Korean baseball, the English Premier League soccer, other stuff going on. But you got the basketball tournaments going on too. But now with baseball coming, that's pretty big. And this, to me, it's big to see what baseball does, because I think a lot of the sports leagues, college, and everything else can kind of see what they do there. So, and after my conversation with Danny, we are going to talk about, I posted on Facebook a question, well, really 2 questions. It was, how do you feel about conference-only games in college football this season, and will there be a season? Got about 7 or 8 comments on that post, so I'm going to read those after my conversation with Danny, which we get into how baseball, got it going, with all the disagreement between the Players Association and the owners, and then we'll go heavy into the Atlanta Braves, because look, of course, this podcast used to be Talking SEC, so I know a big chunk of the audience is in the southeast portion of the country. So I know y'all love the Atlanta Braves, so we're going to get deep into the Atlanta Braves. But that's enough of me talking about what we're going to talk about. Let's jump to the conversation. Here is my interview with Danny Vietti, MLB writer for CBS Sports. All right, welcome back into the Phillip Jordan Sports Podcast, and joining me on today's show is Danny Vietti. He covers Major League Baseball over CBS Sports and in charge of some social media stuff over there as well. And Danny, I appreciate you taking the time out and coming on the podcast.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to join. It's nice to reach another audience down there in Alabama. I haven't gone down to the South too often, so it's nice to get in touch with all y'all down there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's fun down here. And as you were talking off air, it's Braves country down here. There's no doubt, 95% of the baseball fans down here are Braves fans. I know they're excited too about next week, baseball being back, getting actually to see this team that they do love, and we were talking about that off the air as well. And I'm going to get into some other stuff. For you as somebody that covers Major League Baseball or sports in general, how excited are you to actually get to have games to talk about start next week?
Yeah, I feel like a 5-year-old or 6-year-old on Christmas. I really do. I'm counting down the days. We used to have this little countdown when I was a kid. Going back to my Christmas reference, we used to have this little mouse thing. You would move the mouse on each day as you got closer to Christmas, and it's in one of our Christmas boxes. And I've been meaning to bring it out and reinvent it, if you will, to make it a baseball countdown. But I know my old lady would not love that. But no, I really do. I'm super pumped for it. It's been such a strange year all the way around, from social issues to the pandemic to everything in between. We really need something to rally behind, and I think baseball can certainly be that. It's good to see, as we were talking off air, it's just nice to see people come together with sports. It has a way of bringing people from different backgrounds, different cultures. It brings them together. And so whether it's Atlanta Braves, whether you're on the West Coast, San Francisco Giants, Los Angeles Dodgers, we can all kind of agree upon one thing, and that's we all miss sports. And so it'll be really nice to have it back on our screens and something to talk about.
Yeah, the whole thing too. I'm going to talk about you because you have experience playing too as well. And correct me if I'm wrong. You were at University of San Francisco and William Jessup University as a pitcher, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's correct.
What led the transition from playing to being in sports media? Yeah,
so it was actually a pretty easy transition for me. I was really blessed with an opportunity to play at William Jessup, which is it's a small NAIA college, and a lot of people don't know about it. But luckily for me, it's right down the road from Max Preps. And so if anybody out there is familiar with Max Preps, it's the high school sports leader, maxpreps.com. And so Max Preps is actually owned by CBS Sports. A lot of people don't know that. So essentially, I was able to work part-time for Max Preps as a social media, I think my title was social media producer at the time, or something like that. And anyways, so I just kind of worked my way up the totem pole. Once I was done playing, I technically have a couple more years eligibility-wise if I ever get the knack for playing again. But I got an opportunity with a job, and so I really wanted to go into the career field and get my career started. I got a really unique opportunity to become the editor at Max Preps of social media. And then because it's owned by CBS Sports, I was able to work with the CBS Sports crew on a daily basis. And one thing kind of led to another. And now I'm doing social media, and also I'm writing for the MLB section for CBSSports.com. So it was rather easy, especially considering a lot of players I know struggle with the transition. For me, transitioning from playing to straight going into just working in sports made that easier, because a lot of people or a lot of former athletes are forced to work different jobs that might not involve sports. And so for me to still be involved in it and to still have my own piece in the sports world is, it's a good opportunity for me, and I definitely enjoy my job, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with Max Preps because one of a part-time job of mine I have down here in Dothan is I am the producer and host of one of the high school football teams on the radio, but I also host a high school football podcast. So I use Max Preps a lot. And I actually, as much as I use it, I did not know they were linked up with CBS Sports. That's a cool thing to know. But Max Preps that is one of the go-to places if you need to find out some information with high school athletics. So they do a great job over there.
Yeah, I couldn't thank them enough for giving me the opportunity. They really gave me my foot in the door. From Steve Montoya, Zach Poff, Chris Stonebreaker, the list goes on. There's a lot of really good people working within Max Preps, and to your point, they're the leader for a reason. They got everything from stats to schedules, to they even added live video to different high school games. And I know how big football is down there in Alabama. So if you're in Alabama, I'm sure you have an idea of just how crucial and vital Max Preps is to high school sports.
Yeah, we have a few football fans down here. That is for certain on that one. Just a few of them. But baseball's pretty big down here too. We've had a few people come out of here, make it to professionals. I mean, nobody made it like on the Hall of Fame level, but I don't know if you remember Gabe Gross. He's a guy that had played down here. He's actually from the Dothan area. We've had quite a few. So as much as it's football, there's actually been more in the area I'm at, more baseball players come out that's end up actually playing at professional level.
We've been talking a lot about this lately because with the pandemic, they've been talking about, by they, I mean Major League Baseball, there have been rumors that they might decide to add an expansion team because the best way, while money isn't great right now due to the pandemic, one easy way to gain a lot of income really, really fast is by adding an expansion team. And so one of the destinations we were discussing was Birmingham, Alabama. I would love to get more baseball down there in the South because I know it's football dominant and the weather isn't always the best with the humidity and it's pretty hot down there. But I think the South has got to have a closer team. I don't know how close you guys are in proximity to Atlanta, but I would love to get a team down there in Mississippi, Alabama, Nashville, somewhere in that South area, because I think it would really help grow the game in that region of the country.
Yeah, because I mean it's pretty much Atlanta's it. I mean the Tampa Bay Rays, I guess, too, and the Marlins down in Miami. But yeah, the Braves pretty much it. And the thing with that, and I've heard a lot of people talk to that's also much older than me, that there was a time when the Braves were in Milwaukee. They moved down here to Atlanta, and Atlanta's about 4 or 5 hours where I'm at. So like, there's actually maybe some older fans of baseball that the closest team was St. Louis. So it is kind of surprising to me. I mean, I know it is, like I said, warm down here south. Like you said, why there is not more Major League Baseball team. Why they have not tried more like a Birmingham. I think Birmingham would support it greatly. I mean, Birmingham's a city, just from when I've been there, they've wanted some professional sports, but they always get like minor league teams. They got the Birmingham Barons, but like a minor league football team, minor league basketball teams, or minor league hockey, they don't get that major league team. So yeah, Birmingham, I think just, I'm a little biased because the state I live in, but yeah, I think Birmingham would do a tremendous job and get more Southerners and give Atlanta Braves a little run for their money when it comes to some fans in the Southeast.
Yeah, because I was just kind of looking at the map, too. After Texas, so if I'm working across the map going from west to east, after Texas, it goes Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, and then you finally get to Georgia where your Braves are. Or I shouldn't say your Braves because you're a Yankee fan, but the Alabama Braves, I should say. That's a lot of area, and that's a lot of people, dense areas. And that doesn't even include Arkansas, Tennessee, and Missouri that are right there. To your point, it's relatively close to St. Louis where the Cardinals are, but I think there's an untapped market there. So not just Baton Rouge, but somewhere in Mississippi and in Louisiana, we've seen how fanatical their fans can be, from the Saints to LSU. Again, I know it's a big football-centric area, but I would love to see more baseball being attached to those areas because there's been some good players to come out of there. I mean, shoot, Hank Aaron's from Mobile, Alabama. So, there's definitely talent down there, and there's good college programs, too, from Ole Miss to, as I mentioned, LSU, Mississippi State. There's some really good college baseball programs down there, too. So there's definitely plenty of baseball talent down there in the South.
Oh, most definitely, because when you see the college baseball rankings, preseason rankings come out every year when they do get to play, it's littered with SEC teams, and then Florida State has put out several players as well, and even some of the smaller colleges around here do great. So yeah, it is a untapped baseball area here in the Southeast, without a doubt. And talking about doubt, so we kind of get back to the upcoming season is coming on July 23rd. We get 2 games that day, and I know the 24th, pretty much everybody else will get going. But with everything that happened, the stoppage in spring because of the pandemic, and the back and forth between the Players Association and the owners, for someone that covers this sport, was there ever any doubt in your mind that they were actually going to play?
There was a lot of doubt. Yeah. It was such a moody sequence. It really was. There was about a 24-hour span where I was for sure there was going to be a season. A few hours later, I was saying there's no chance we're going to have a season. And then a few hours later, Rob Manfred stepped up and said we're going to have a 60-game season. I want to say it was a Tuesday where all of that went down. And there were some people within the league that were expecting there to be a deal. And then there was another group that were saying there's no way, because the owners and the players were so left and the players were so right. They just really weren't inching towards one another. There was more than a few times where I really didn't think we were going to have a season. And I should say this, it's looking good so far, and I'm really excited. I'm really pumped to have a season. But that being said, there's a lot still to be configured and a lot to get done before we can, definitively say we're going to have a season this year. As we've seen before, this virus can change within a minute. It can change completely and turn this entire world in 180 degrees. So we're seeing players opt out. We're seeing spikes across the United States. I really hope this doesn't happen. I really hope we do have a season. I'm very confident we will have a season, but to 100% say we're going to have a season right now, I think might be too confident, just because I think there's still more tasks to be done. There's more I's to dot and more T's to cross before we have opening day coming up next Thursday.
Yeah, absolutely. Because things could change. Like virus could change tomorrow, next week. It's just kind of like you just. I guess you're like you're sure it's going to happen, but you also want at the same time like always something else going to happen. So it's. I guess I keep your fingers crossed on everything. Really, any sport right now, how everything's been going. I know I was kind of last night before I was prepping for our conversation. I was kind of looking back at what kind of the disagreements were too, and it seemed like a lot of it too. You saw where the players were wanting to play deep in November. But it seemed like to me the owners were really big on they want to get the season done as early as they can because they know the playoffs is a big money maker for them. That's where they get a lot of their money. A lot of revenue comes from playoff, the TV rights. A big thing there too is making sure they can get to the playoffs and end the season early enough for that. Yeah,
and part of that too is you don't really want to conflict. You don't want to go head-to-head with National Football League. And, of course, once November rolls around, National Football League is steamrolling right through. So I really didn't want to see that either. I think Major League Baseball needs its time to shine, especially when the playoffs come around. And that time to shine is normally October. With a 60-game season, it's a very unique situation where essentially every team, all 30 teams are in a playoff race now, which is awesome because it's going to make each and every game more and more impactful and more meaningful. So I'm excited for that aspect. With that being said, yes, the owners wanted more of a regular playoff scenario or regular playoff situation. That's what they're aiming for. At the same time, in my opinion, the owners were reaching for a little too much. They were really trying to penny pinch the players for everything that the players would have or will be receiving this year. I kind of lean towards the player, or I lean towards the player side of things. I'm for the millionaire, not the billionaire. There was a lot of disconnect between both sides. And there's a new CBA coming up next year in 2021. And because of this disconnect between both sides, it's going to put baseball at kind of an odd standstill, in that both sides are going to have to figure out a way to work with one another. Because if we've seen it before back in the 90s with the strike, if both sides can't figure out a solution and they can't figure out a way to work with one another and step into each other's shoes, we're lucky to have baseball this year, but if they can't step into each other's shoes and figure out a deal, then we could have a very similar situation as we do right now next year, to where we might not have a season, or I should say in 2022 when that CBA is up. So to me, both sides, the owners and the players, I tend to lean towards the players' side, but both sides need to do a better job of seeing both perspectives.
Yeah, and then they just need to think, and I get, like I said, both sides look at it this way too. Look what happened in the 90s when that happened. I mean, it took a few years for baseball to kind of get its popularity back. I mean, Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa had a big part in that, and I think that was important to get some kind of a season in now, because if with everything going on, if you weren't able to play this year, that was going to turn a lot of fans off too.
There's no doubt about it. There's definitely some fans that were turned off just over the past couple months. And I can't say I blame them. A lot of the response, especially even over the past couple of weeks, I've kind of been hyping up the season, saying, 2 weeks away, we're 1 week away. I've tried to really keep my followers and baseball fans excited. But a lot of the comments I'm getting are, I'll believe it when I see it. Because the problem is that a lot of the trust that was built over the last, decade, 2 decades since that 1994 strike, a lot of that trust has now gone away, because they don't trust Commissioner Rob Manfred. They don't trust what's going on up in the front offices of Major League Baseball, because it just hasn't been a a smooth transition here. Especially, they haven't dealt with the COVID situation correctly. Rob Manfred did not handle the Astros situation as well as he could have, in my opinion. Time and time again, players and fans have been let down by Major League Baseball. And especially now, over these last couple of weeks, I have yet to see somebody from Major League Baseball. And I don't mean to put this podcast as just a bashing of Major League Baseball, but I've yet to see somebody from Major League Baseball step up and have a press conference for these players. We're asking these players to go out there to essentially risk their health, and we're asking them to leave their families. A lot of these scenarios, they're having to leave their families to protect their families from the virus or the possibility of contracting the virus. We have yet to see somebody from Major League Baseball step up and have a press conference to answer a lot of the questions that fans and players have. The transparency just hasn't been there, and to me, Major League Baseball has to do a better job of communicating with their employees being the players, if they expect us to, by us, I mean the players, if they expect us to actually have a season.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a big thing, communicating, whatever form of business, if the employees want to know what's going on. So yeah, that's a key thing. But with them going to play, of course, you mentioned the 60-game schedule. Such more sense of urgency now, because now, look, if you have a 1-1 series, a 3-game series with somebody, hey, that third game is very vital because you don't want to get off to a slow start. Because look at the Nationals last year, they got off to a slow start, but that's in a 162 game season. This is 60. If you get a slow start here, you can probably count the playoffs goodbye. And then I'm very intrigued by the DH in the National League, and I wanted to get your thoughts on that, because when you look at that, of course, the American League teams, they're used to it. They build their rosters for that. When you look at that for the National League, are there any teams out there you're intrigued to see how they're going to use that, having the DH now?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question, just because of the recent news with Yasiel Puig signing with Atlanta. Mm-hmm. He's shown that he has a dynamic arm out in the outfield, but I think Atlanta intends to use him primarily as a designated hitter, and they might kind of fluctuate that with Austin Riley over there as well. It'll give National League teams an option, or the possibility of finding a hot guy, and by a hot guy I mean somebody who's swinging a hot bat. And with these 60-player pools, you could find that. You can find those lightning in a bottle type players. The Oakland A's are. They're infamous, if you will, for this. Infamous in a good way, I should say. They normally find these guys. Seth Brown was their guy last year. Seth Brown, he's an NAI kid from Lewis Clark College. He wasn't a high draft pick. He just kind of worked his way up through the minor leagues, and he became one of their everyday outfielders toward the second half of the season last year. Their season ended a little quicker than they expected in that wild card game against the Rays. But teams like the Oakland A's, they have the ability with that designated hitter. They can test some guys out. They can throw a couple of their guys, their minor league guys who are swinging a hot bat, and they can see what they'll do at the major leagues. National League teams will now have that option. National League teams, unfortunately, haven't had that option for so long, but now they do. I do have questions with certain teams such as the Rockies, the Marlins, and the Giants, teams that don't really have the depth from within their own organization to fill that new spot. And unfortunately, there's not really enough time before the season here to fill that role from outside the organization. The Rockies last year, their designated hitters, and they played 10 games in American League Parks last year. Their designated hitters combined for a 160 average, 0 home runs, 0 RBIs. So there was little to no production out of that designated hitter spot. Granted, it was limited time, and they didn't know they knew they were going to have a designated hitter for 10 games, but they're not trying really to fill that spot. But the Marlins as well, they also, their designated hitters in their 10 games in American League Park, they hit below the Mendoza line. They had 1 home run and 4 RBIs. So very minimal production. There's certain teams that I would say I'm concerned about, just because they're not built this way. They haven't had enough time. They haven't been given ample enough time to fill that hole, just because they haven't had a DH for as long as they've existed. And the entire plan, the entire environment, if you will, has now changed within essentially it was over a month span just because of COVID. Now we're changing all the rules, and now we're expecting National League teams to fill that hole. So there's certain teams that I think will definitely benefit from the DH, one of those being the Dodgers, another one being the Atlanta Braves, and then a couple teams that I truly am concerned about with the Marlins and the Rockies and the San Francisco Giants.
And you're talking about the Braves, of course, I told you off air, me being here in the Southeast, and a lot of my podcast listeners do come from the Southeast. Of course, this is Braves country down here, and when I tell some of my friends, I say, hey, I'm going to have an MLB writer on the show, they said, man, what Yasiel Puig? I knew that was the question I was going to ask. And you mentioned him a little bit there, but just overall, what did you think about that signing, bringing him in? And of course, with the Braves, you don't know when or if Freddie Freeman is going to be with the team because, from all reports and from his wife, I believe, he had a pretty bad case of the coronavirus. And then Nick Markakis, he is not going to be part of this team at all. He's opted out. So bringing in a guy like Yasiel Puig, overall impact, and what do you think of the fit with this team?
I personally think it was something the Atlanta Braves front office had to do, just because they're expected to compete this year. You only have so many years left of Ozzie Albies, Ronald Acuna, Freddie Freeman. You might not have Freddie Freeman, to your point, at all this year. So your time span for competing is so small, and a lot of fans and a lot of front office members don't really realize how small it is. But contracts really do come up quickly. They expire quickly. So the Braves are expected to compete this year, and when you don't have Nick Markakis, a veteran hitter who's top 3 in hits since he broke into this league among active leaders, he's top 3 in hits since he made his debut back in the 2000s. He's a veteran guy, and he brings leadership, and he brings a good glove out there in the outfield. You take him off the roster, now you're going to take Freddie Freeman, who I love Ronald Acuna, but Freddie Freeman is the leader of that ball club. Now you're taking 2 really key contributors to that team off the team, and 2 veteran guys too. I think Yasiel Puig is a interesting fit personality-wise because I think ideally Atlanta would have wanted to sign a more veteran presence to fill the role of Markakis and possibly Freeman as well. But there really aren't any bats out there. There was Tim Beckham, who is still out there and unsigned, but he still has to serve, I believe it's another 22 games left of his suspension that has tinkered into his suspension was last year. It's going to tinker into whenever he does sign. But other than that, Scooter Gennett's another guy. There really aren't too many bats out there that are available. Yasiel Puig was, without a doubt, head and shoulders above the next guy in line. So I think if you're expecting this team to compete and then you're taking away, you're subtracting 2 veteran pieces, you got to fill that role somehow. You kind of, hope for the best and plan for the worst type thing. I think Yasiel Puig is a good hitter, a guy that hit 24 home runs last year with Cincinnati and Cleveland, a guy that's been there, done that. He has postseason experience. Personality-wise, he's interesting, and he's had some disputes between players and managers before, but he's matured a little bit over these last couple of years, and as long as he finds his role and finds some success in Atlanta, I think it could be a really nice fit.
Oh, when you look at their pitching staff, the starters there, of course you got Mike Soroka, who went 13-4 last year at age 21 with a 2.68 ERA. And then they bring in Cole Hamels, 36-year-old veteran. Last couple of years, the record's not too great as a starter. I know in 2017 he was 11-6 with the Rangers, but 2018 with Rangers and Cubs he went 9-12. Then last year with the Cubs 7-7. So how are you feeling overall with their staff, especially when you get past Mike Soroka?
I think the X factor is going to be Mike Foltynewicz by far. He really struggled much of last season, and all of a sudden towards the latter half, the very end of the season, he really started to turn it on. He had one really good performance in the playoffs, and then he had one really terrible performance. He's really a flip of the coin, but I think he's really going to be the X factor because you mentioned Soroka and Max Fried and Cole Hamels. You know pretty much what you're getting out of those guys. Soroka, Fried, Hamels, they're all going to give you innings. Whether they have a Cy Young year or whether they have a mediocre year, you're going to get good production from those guys. Foltynewicz, you don't quite know what you're going to get out of him. He's really a guy that's going to have to give them depth because especially in a season that is this weird 60-game condensed season, you're going to need depth because you're not expecting as many of your starters to throw as many innings. You need your starters to go out there for at least 4 to 5 innings to give you some type of production. With that being said, I think Atlanta did a much better job of bolstering their bullpen in the offseason, too, with the signing of Will Smith. They're going to have Melancon coming back. They're going to have Luke Jackson, who's going to be healthy. Darren O'Day is going to be healthy. Shane Green's going to be healthy. So there's 3 or 4 guys that they either added or they were injured much of last season. They would have really used and would have been very valuable in the playoffs last year. Their bullpen's going to be much, much better than it was last year. But I really think Mike Sultanevich is going to be key, just providing depth, giving him that 4th starter that they can rely on. It's not only in the regular season, but come postseason, they're going to really need that 4th arm to give them some innings.
So when you look at this Brave team, just kind of throw them in with the whole National League. Of course, they're in the same division as the Nationals. The Dodgers, always super talented, just have not been able to get that championship. I know they've won 7 straight National League West titles and 2 of the last 3 World Series they were in. But when you look at National League, with the Braves especially, are they a team you could see coming out of the National League? If not, is that who do you think is the favorite in the National League?
So I think Los Angeles should be the favorite, and they will be. They're really set up well for a 60-game season lineup wise. I'll say pitching wise, they might struggle out of the gate just because we're not going to ask the starters. I should say teams aren't going to ask their starters to throw more than 5-6 innings because spring training is condensed to a 3-week period. Their arms aren't going to be as in shape. These pitchers aren't. So the Dodgers are going to dominate eventually because of their starters, but out of the gate, we're not going to ask as much of their starters. Teams are going to have to rely on their bullpens initially. The bullpen for the Dodgers is, it's a bit down this year, especially compared to previous years. So I think the Dodgers will be, they should be favorites. They will be favorites. A team out of the Central I'm really circling is the Cincinnati Reds. Their offense is built for a condensed season. Their pitching, their starting rotation is really nice. They have questions in their bullpen in regards to their bullpen depth and whether they can get enough guys to, just provide them some innings after their starters. They're going to have to ask a lot out of their starters if they want to compete. The Reds are. And then out of the East, you mentioned the Braves. The Braves they've come up short the last couple of years, but they're a year more experienced. Guys like Ronald Acuna, Ozzie Albies. These are guys that are more experienced. They've learned a lot, hopefully, especially Acuna. He's had a couple, examples that were proven of him where he didn't run out of the box. And so hopefully he's learned from that. He's going to be a front runner for MVP this year. Fell just a couple stolen bases short last year from becoming the 5th 40-40 guy. So to say they're going to come out of the West, I really don't want to make any too bold predictions or anything, just because I think so much can change with this season. All it takes, God forbid this happen, but all it takes is for one of the MLB stars to contract this virus and all of a sudden they have to sit out 2 weeks. And especially if it's a starting pitcher, if he sits out 2 weeks, it's going to take him at least another 2 weeks to get back up in the speed of things and get their arm back in shape to where they can actually produce for their team. So I don't want to make any too bold prediction just because I think a lot can change, and there's so much uncertainty with this specific season. But the Braves are going to be right there. They got a lot of talent, a lot of young talent. I think Freddie Freeman being there is going to be necessary, though, if they want to make a postseason push.
Yeah, absolutely. Then, real quickly, I'll flip over to the American League, and then I'll let you go, because I've kept you 10 minutes longer than I said I will when I initially contacted you about being on the podcast. I said 20. We are at 30 minutes right now. Over in the American League, of course, the Yankees add in another arm in Garrett Cole. Come from the Astros. The Astros still there. That should be a good team. I know they're going to. Probably a good thing for them there's no fans, because they won't get booed out of all these stadiums they go into, because I'm sure that was going to happen. They were going to be the biggest villains in baseball had we had a normal season with fans. I know that. But when you look at the American League, who's the favorite you think to come out of there?
Yeah, I hate to be this guy, the cliche guy that just says the Dodgers and the Yankees, because that's what everybody's saying. But that's going to be me. I'm going to say the favorites out of the National League is going to be the Dodgers, and the favorites out of the American League going to be the Yankees. this season really poses well for the Yankees too. Their bullpen, from Britton to Chapman. Chapman actually just had to leave spring training because of COVID, but he's expected to come back. To Adam Ottavino, the list goes on of the bullpen arms and the bullpen talent that team has. I think this season poses really well for the Yankees, health-wise too. Aaron Judge wasn't going to be healthy. If we would have had a regular 162-game season starting in April, Aaron Judge wasn't expected to be healthy. James Paxton wasn't going to be healthy. Garrett Cole was even having some lingering issues as well. So they're going to be healthy going into this season, and they're going to have loads and loads of depth. The Yankees really do have the advantage going into the season just because they not only have enough starting pitching depth, but they have the bullpen to combat whatever does get thrown their way. The Tampa Bay Rays are another team. We were talking about them a little bit before. They have a really star-studded bullpen. They have 4 or 5 guys that average fastballs are above 95. Anderson was a guy that really came out of nowhere last year and took over that closing role. Him and Pagan shared duties last year. He's going to be really tough out of that bullpen. And they're starting pitchers, too, between Glasnow to Charlie Morton to Blake Snell, who was a Cy Young guy 2 years ago. I think this season's really going to come down to pitching because I think the numbers across the board from hitting and even to pitching, too, I think the numbers are going to be down just because players and teams haven't had enough time to really come together and get their mental habits and their hand-eye coordination down as they normally would have during a normal season. So I think pitching is really going to dominate. I think the numbers will be down across the board just because I think pitchers will have the advantage throughout this season. So the Tampa Bay Rays and then the White Sox are certainly a sleeper team. They have a lot of young talent, starting with Eloy Jimenez. Luis Robert is the guy that's going to be making his rookie debut this year. He's supposed to be one of the better prospects we've seen in recent years. So, and then out west, the last team I'm looking at is the Oakland A's. Another team that has a lot of really good young talent, good star-studded pitching. Unfortunately, Jesus Luzardo is going to maybe have to sit this season out just because he actually just got sent home for COVID-19 as well. But A.J. Puck is another guy that the A's have. He's another young guy that could really step into that role. So there's a lot of teams. It's going to be very competitive, I think, just because, like we mentioned, every game is going to be crucial. 60-game season, 60-game sprint. So there's going to be a lot of teams that we weren't expecting to really be playoff contenders, but they might be thrown into the thick of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one thing. You see, if you're a diehard baseball fan, you love the 162, but you're getting 60. So it's like you said, it's kind of like the playoffs have already started. Next week the playoffs start. Is you got to be on top of your game all year long. And if the Yankees and the Dodgers do play in the World Series, I'll tell you who's going to be happy: Fox, because that will be big time ratings if you have LA and New York playing in the World Series. But anyways, we got a long ways to go till that, 60 games in the playoffs. And Danny, I do want to say I'll keep you a little bit longer than I said I would, but I do appreciate you coming on the show today to talk about baseball and kind of get us ready for the season next week. But if the listeners out there wanted to follow you online, where can they find you?
Yeah, it was a pleasure joining you. All my latest, I'm going to have another piece coming out either this week or next week. We're still kind of scheduling things out, but you can find all that on CBSSports.com. And you can follow me on Twitter at Danny Vietti.
All right, sounds good. Go follow Danny for some good baseball content. And like I said, Danny, I appreciate you coming on. I hope maybe we can talk again sometime down the road and kind of see how this season is shaking out.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. Great meeting you as well. Take care.
Thanks again to Danny Vietti for coming on the podcast to talk all things Major League Baseball. And I look forward to maybe catching up with him sometime down the road and talking some more baseball. So now we're jumping to a mailbag segment. Mailbag for this show is a little bit different than probably what you see on or hear on other radio shows and podcasts. Sometimes I may just put a call out, hey, what's your questions? What do you want me to talk about on the show? Or I may do almost like a question of the week type thing where I ask a question and get your responses. I used to do that on the old radio show. But that's kind of what I did for this week, and I'll figure something out for next week. So this kind of segment will usually be held for the Thursday or late week show, depending on how things go. probably won't do one next week because I have 2 guests coming on for the late week show. Let you guys know when we get done with this mailbag. But anyways, so I went on Facebook, Phillip Jordan Sports Podcast Facebook page, and said, "What's up, college sports fans? How do you feel about conference-only college football schedule? Will we have a season? Post below and your comments will be read on a future show." So we start off with Brandon Eisman. If y'all been listening to me talk for any number of time, you know Brandon is a regular here, covers LSU for LSU Wire. Brandon had to say, conference only will make it interesting. I think we'll have a season, but every conference has to agree to the same number of games or it won't work. Getting these conferences to all agree with each other, that's a big thing, but I do believe they all need to play the same amount of games. So the Big Ten saying we're going to play 10. Now, the Big 12 has not, and SEC and ACC has not officially come out and said anything. It was rumored ACC or being discussed that they were going to do conference only, and they were going to help Notre Dame out in the process, but they haven't officially come out and said anything. The only 2 conferences that have officially came out and said they're doing conference only games is the Big Ten and the Pac-12. Well, they traditionally, or not traditionally, but the last few seasons, they've been playing 9-game conference schedule, so they could add another game to get to 10. SEC plays 8. Are they going to add 2 more games? ACC and Big 12. Then you have that whole deal with the ACC and SEC. There's some rivalry games. You have the South Carolina Clemson matchup, Georgia Tech, Florida State, and Florida. So that you have those big crossover matchups like that. And also Louisville and Kentucky. So will the SEC and ACC kind of broker a deal to keep those games? That would be interesting to see. But I agree, Brandon. You need, especially if you're going to do a college football playoff, to judge all these teams, to do it fairly, they all need to have played the same amount of games. But the thing about that is you don't know what's going to happen with a pandemic. Could a team have a spike or in cases, and they can almost to the point where they can't play that week, and then if they can't make that game up, do you punish them for that? So that's where it's going to be interesting. If something like that didn't happen, yes, they need to play all games, but then you also got taken into the fact that they may be forced a situation where some teams play lesser games than others because you just don't know what's going to happen if the virus really hits one team very, very hard. Jeremy Grace, conference-only schedules are different, but something we could see in a majority of teams with lots of losses because of the fact that they know this is the only games they are going to play and it means more. Could result in teams having more passion for each game, and this could result in better quality play. You might have a lot of 6-3 teams or 5-4 teams, or many ever games, or how many ever games they play, only winning half of them, and maybe 2 teams or so in each conference with 7-2 records. For everybody to know, I am reading these live. I have not read these comments until right now. You're hearing on the podcast, so part of me kind of deciphering some of these posts. Yeah, that's the thing. You're playing only conference games, and if you add more, you could have more loss, especially in a conference like the SEC that's very competitive. You can see that. I mean, you could see. I don't think if you do see conference only games, especially in the SEC, I don't think you're going to see an undefeated team. Big Ten, I could see Ohio State running through it. ACC, I could see Clemson running through it. Big 12 you wouldn't have an undefeated team. I think Pac-12 probably the same way. So it's going to be tough for some conferences to get through. Justin Mahon. Conference-only games will, of course, shorten the season, but if they can get a full season in the spring, I say just push it to the spring. Spring will not work. Absolutely not. That is a non-starter. And everybody keep putting the spring thing out there. It's lunacy. You can't. Okay, in theory, you can do it, but it won't work. But for the reason for being, one, how do we know the virus will be gone then? That'll still be cold if you go right at the beginning of spring or in early March, because a lot of these places you're going to be playing is still going to be cold. I mean, yeah, in the South, we're fine. It's starting to get warmer then, or if it ever got cold to start with. But other places, not so much. And another big reason, you think Trevor Lawrence is going to play in the spring? No, he's going to be working about the combine if they have it, and also going to be worried about the draft. He's not going to get hurt. Justin Fields the same way. Your best college football players are not going to play in the spring. It's just not going to happen. And people keep floating spring. I just disagree with that. That's just no. You can do it in theory, but it's not going to be the product that you would want to see, especially from the big teams. And then another thing, we always talk about safety in football. How are you going to do that? Because you're playing in spring, you're going to ask them to turn around and play in the fall again? No. And then you're also losing development because coaches want those springtime to develop the players for the upcoming season. Well, if you're doing it this way, there's no development there. So that's another thing. So it's the spring. If they don't play in the fall, they don't play, period. There's not a college football season in the 2021 academic year. Dusty Stanfield. I don't think they will play because players and staff are testing positive left and right. In response to your first question, I love it. All these non-conference games where you play nobody teams are just stupid. Playing a conference-only season shows how good you really are. Just my opinion. I agree. I hate some of the matchups we see early in the year, then that next to last week in the SEC is just horrible. But you do need non-conference games because I do believe if we only have a 14 playoff, that is going to make it very hard on the committee. Well, maybe not hard. I just look at it like this. How do you know which conference is really better? I mean, by preconceived notions going into preseason. Other than that, how they did on these crossover games, the big teams play, I don't know. It just seems like you need that. You need that to kind of change. I say you need to expand the playoff for this year only. But they're not going to do that. So it's going to be tough, I think, for the committee. And what if you have this? Is not going to happen, but there's always a chance. You never know what's going to happen. What if you had 5 undefeated conference champions? How you pick the 4? That's a big thing. And they didn't play any non-conference games, obviously. So you're trying to figure out who's the best. I think that'll be a tough situation. Ryan Wright puts in, season won't happen. First few players that get sick during the season, it'll end. I think they're going to try. I do believe that. I think they are going to try. Will it succeed? Well, I don't know. And hearing some people talk, perhaps they're going to push the season back to October when it starts. So, and I think you go ahead and start as early as you can, and so you can fill in some dates if something like that was to happen and you had to postpone and reschedule some stuff. David Kirkpatrick, it will all be canceled in a month. Kind of goes back to what just talked about there with Ryan Wright. I'm still feeling like it will happen. They will. I still feel like they will try. And I'm just going to leave it at that. They will try. And the final one, Derek Shaughnessy Roberts. I'm of the opinion it will most likely be canceled before it starts. People aren't taking it seriously, and I'm not sure that they ever will. It's unfortunate, but we don't deserve to have live sports at this rate. Look, and I'm not going to get into certain topics or certain talking points there because that lies kind of some way in the political side of things, and unfortunately people are making this a political thing, just not just a health thing. So I'm just going to leave it there, but it could happen. The SEC has said it'll be end of the month here in July when they may make a decision. They have pushed back all the other fall sports to August 31st. Of course, that the season of football is into September, a few days after that. So we'll see. I mean, they could very well. We don't know. As we were talking about baseball, when I was talking to Danny there, when we was talking baseball, and he mentioned just thinking it can change by an hour a day, any time. It's the same thing here. So we just got to wait and see. Just got to be hopeful that things start to turn around and we can have things we love again, and that is college football. Anyways, that is going to do it for today's edition of the Phillip Jordan Sports Podcast. Once again, I appreciate everybody checking out the show, listening. It really means a lot that you take the time to make this show part of your day, trying to grow this thing. Betting on myself, changing it from talking SEC to the Phillip Jordan Sports Podcast. Sorry about that. Sometimes I get talking so fast, I just mess words up. But yeah, betting on myself, putting my name as the show name. So I do appreciate everybody checking out. Got some good stuff for next week. Multiple guests. Won't we just do a lot of guests next week? On the early week show, I don't know if the early week show will be on Monday or Tuesday because I'm trying to get a second guest for that one. So we'll see. But right now, I do have Jason Ray, who's Last Word on College Football managing editor. He writes about a lot about Oklahoma. He had an interesting piece this past week on impact transfers. So we're going to talk about all that and talk about some Big 12 with Jason. That'll be either Monday or Tuesday. Now, we'll be releasing one on Thursday. Big show. Really look forward to this. Two guys I haven't had on in a good bit, and I'm really excited to talk to them again. Bill Bender, the Sporting News National College Football writer, makes his return to the podcast. Me and Bill have not talked since a day or two after LSU defeated Clemson National Championship game. So we have not. So you're looking at 6 months. It's been almost half a year since me and Bill Bender have talked. So I'm really looking forward to having Bill on. And Brett Sobleski, Bleacher Report NFL analyst, will be on the show as well. Get his thoughts. We're going to talk some quarterbacks. Me and him have an exercise we've been doing the last couple of years where we look at the upcoming rookie quarterbacks. And Brett now does some NFL draft analysis as well. So I may look at some of these quarterbacks for this upcoming year in college football as well. Hopefully we'll have a season. So that's what we got coming up this next week. Real excited about those shows. I hope you guys are going to enjoy it. A lot of people love hearing from Bill and Brant, so some old favorites are coming on. Jason as well. Jason does a great job. I think I've had him on the show once to preview the LSU Oklahoma semifinal game. And Jason does a great job. Great insight on him from when it comes to college football. Oklahoma Sooners, just a whole bunch of good stuff. So that's going to do it for today. Guys, remember you can follow me on all your favorite social media platforms at PJordanSEC. If you are listening to this on YouTube or you're ever watching any of the videos, please subscribe to the channel and also like the videos and leave a comment. And also, if you're just the audio-only version person, that's what you like, that's what you prefer, check it out. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, all your favorite podcast platforms. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe, rate, and review. If you leave a review, I will read it on a future edition of the show. And check out all my work over at Last Word on College Football. And tune in this fall for high school football season on 96.9 The Legend, where I am the in-studio host and producer for Dothan Wolves football. Anyways, everybody, that's going to do it. I hope everybody has a great weekend. Be safe. And I'll talk to you guys early next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to today's Phillip Jordan Sports Podcast. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to tune in to the next episode for more great sports talk.